what I find in Hollywood is that artists very rarely take that on, that role of torchbearer for for the soul. Art has always had that mission, right, to really help the world individuate, to help point the way to the future.
I'm Stephen Bradshaw, and this is Snowball Psychology. Louisa, so good to have you on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Steve. It's always so nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I feel the same. So, you're a creative coach doing work that goes deep into the unconscious and uses dreams as a source of inspiration for clients in professional industries, particularly the screenwriting and film industry. And we first met 8 years ago when I was invited through a friend to a fireside reading of The Tempest by Shakespeare at your house up above Malibu. And it was a deep dive into Shakespearean lore. And you provided this rich introduction about how this was relevant at the time of Shakespeare's life, what this meant to him personally. And it was just such a thoughtful presentation that it left an indelible mark on my mind. And yeah, I so appreciated it. And you draw from a rich background in Shakespeare. You were a Shakespearean actor in both New York and Copenhagen. You have this background in ballet and movement and a practicing Buddhist. You were executive producer and came up with the concept of the show Will, which was a dramatized account of the young Will Shakespeare. You have this rich creative background that you bring into your healing work, essentially, and creative work. And I'm so happy to have you on because those are all things that are very alive to me. And I'm particularly interested in starting at this moment where your snowball began, the first snowflake, the first crystallization. And, since you work with dreams, I'm wondering if there was an important dream or an important moment when you got onto your path in the current iteration, an important starting point for what was to come to get you here.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, and I'll preface by saying dreams have always really been a lodestar for me. So most of the life choices that I've made have had some kind of component of dream to them. The dreams would come, I pay attention to my dreams. So they come in pretty strong and they come in pretty clear, especially after years and years of working with them. Um, so so they will always correct me if there's some if I'm not on the right path, or if there's something I'm missing, if there's something that I could incorporate that would really help set me back on the path of my life.
So if you misspeak today, you'll be getting a dream tonight.
Oh yeah. I'm getting some kind of dream. Okay, what was that? But I mean, they're not clear like that. They're not. But we are in constant conversation, me and the dreams, and so they will tell me in their way if there is something else I could be doing, if there's something else that I haven't really thought of. And so throughout my life since my late teens, really, the dreams have been that lodestar, and they have been a constant companion for me. But in the current iteration, when I really started coaching more full time, working with creatives, working with people on their dreams, I would say that happened around 5 years ago at this point. And I was a new mother. Um, very quickly back into my life. My career was going well. I was writing and I was pitching shows and had a baby. Kind of realized pretty quickly that if I wanted to spend any time with this new ball of light, that I would probably have to pivot my career away from those long, long, brutal hours of television. And that was a hard choice for me, obviously, because I'd worked very hard to get to where I was. But the dreams would come, and I was doing my best to hold both things at the same time for several months, but I was becoming more and more unhappy.
Can I ask, were you doing dream work with a dream practitioner at that time? Had you already developed
I
that as
was.
a, okay, so you
Yeah.
were doing that to
Yeah.
support your writing and acting at that time?
Yes, I was. And so at this point, my creative process was heavily influenced by dreams. It had always been that way since I was an actor. When I became a writer, everything I did had a dream component to it because I found that it really was the best way to get out of your ego consciousness around what's supposed to happen, what you think should happen, what you think the scene is about, and really get deeply into this layer underneath of that where all artists want to live, where the work kind of just does itself.
Does the ego produce dead fiction? Does it produce flat, uninteresting work?
Not always. I mean, I think technique and intellect can get you very far in the creative process, but what you have to have also is that river underneath the river, if you will, where the unconscious has a space to come up and take over. Because if you just write with your ego mind or you just act with your ego mind, you're only ever going to get the version of your content that is what you think it should be. Fine for many mediums, you could probably make a lot of money doing that. But ultimately, what we're trying to do as artists is bring something to the culture that it hasn't yet seen and that our culture isn't yet aware of, right? So we are really trying to bring the unconscious through our work so that the culture can look at what we're making and go, oh, okay, there is a different way. There is something I haven't thought of. In order for that to live through the artist, we have to be very open. We have to be very open to the unconscious. We can't just look outside of ourselves and say, oh, well, this is how this type of story is supposed to go. Although we must know that because that's part of mastery, right? We have to train, we have to know how to write for our format, how to act certain characters in a specific way that makes sense um, to the ego mind, to our understanding, and to structurally, we have to know what we're doing. And two, we have to bring the new through. That newness comes from the artist as well, right? The artist always points the way forward. And so we have to be open to that something else to come in and move through our work. What also happens when you work with the dream realm, with the unconscious, is that a different level of authenticity will come through in your work. Just simply because you're open to experiences, memories, dreams, reflections, as Jung would say, that perhaps you wouldn't otherwise allow yourself to go to for that character because the ego says it's wrong. Well, Juliet has to be happy in this scene. She's in love. Well, what if I'm not happy? What if that's not what's coming through? What if it's a sorrowful Juliet on that balcony? Well, we can relate to that, right? Most of us can relate to that feeling of, oh, it's never going to happen. I'm never going to get what I hope for. Equally potent, right? But if we're not open to what is coming through from the unconscious, we may not go there because we have a set idea of what should happen in the scene.
Yeah, and I feel in our culture, in the Westerner mindset, we're very good at the egoic side of things, of building
Very
things up
good.
mechanically, of sharpening the
Mhm.
toolkit, and we often are under resourced on that imaginative aspect, right?
Absolutely. And particularly now where AI is so prominent, um, it can do it for us. Chat GPT can essentially write my next script if I ask it to. And it'll probably be pretty good. You know, we don't really need actors because we can have the AI version of them and we can just create content with the image and likeness of the person. We don't need the person themselves, really. But so what happens now, or what I'm hoping will happen to a larger extent and what I'm certainly seeing with the people who come and work with me, is that yeah, it's a great thing to work for, to get the money and to get the recognition from the world, to get the fame, all of those things. But really, what we're looking for now is the process itself, the individuation process through the artistry that we're creating, which then in turn will also help to individuate the culture. So, um, so yes, we've really kind of, I think, come to that edge of where the ego can take us. It's not given us the satisfaction, the happiness that perhaps we thought it would. And so, what do we do now? Well, we go within. We have to find it somewhere else because this world out there is not going to provide it for us. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to get back to the dream that kicked things off, but since you bring up
Mm-hmm.
AI, I see AI as an extension, a further crystallization, like the ego, that
Yeah.
is now electronically stored, and we're externalizing a lot of our knowledge and then able to
Mm-hmm.
access it in this way. And it's it really calls into question what the role of the human is when so much is able to happen externalized. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, the soul, that new life that you're referring to, is our final resting place.
Mm-hmm.
There's something essential emerging out of us that enlivens the world, and that the technique is secondary to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AI is forcing us more and more to recognize that. And the people that can keep uh, tending to their inspiration will have more and
Mm-hmm.
more of a place, I feel, in if if they can um, find a place in the world to channel that inspiration.
Yeah, Steve, I really agree with you. And I think in that regard, AI can be incredibly helpful on that soul journey, right? Not just because it makes things that were otherwise difficult and time consuming much easier and much faster, but also because it forces us to really reckon with, who am I? What is it that is uniquely human? What is it that is uniquely me? That the world must need for whatever reason, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And I think again, dreams really help crystallize that for us because it gives us that inner um, metaphor, that inner symbol of what it means to be human, what we have to do, where we are going. Dreams always come with some kind of hint, intimation of the future as well, my future as well as the collective future. So when you really start to work with those images and take them seriously, it'll um, fine tune and elevate our humanity and our sense of self. So,
Yeah,
mhm.
um, I read uh, an I guess it was an artist commenting on AI imagery, and he said not a single image has stayed with him or left a significant impact on him of all the thousands of AI images he's seen. And I
Mhm.
feel the same, that there's a lack of resonance so far in what we see from the digital world. And
Yeah.
I think our dream images are so alive. And we've talked about how in our clients, when they start to talk about their dreams and they bring their dreams to the surface more, they come alive. And there's something
Mhm.
very resonant and powerful about those images.
Absolutely. And it really makes you wonder, where is it coming from and what is this world? Because when people start to engage those images, I'll have new clients that'll come in and they'll say, what if it doesn't work? What if I can't get there? What if the images don't come alive? I've never seen it not happen, not once. I've never seen it not happen. The images are so present, and all I have to go do is say, where do you see the dog? they'll point to it. They know where it is in space around them at this moment, sometimes months after the actual dream happened. So it's and then yes, as you were saying, that it animates people. And it's because it comes from the self, it comes from the soul. It's all of those things that maybe we have an idea that we are, maybe we don't know yet, but as soon as we start to really work with them, they come alive around us, and we come alive to all of those images as well. And it's interesting what you're saying with AI, that those images don't resonate with you. And I think part of it is, so my brother is a photographer. He has the same reaction as you do. And what he says is that it's because he knows intellectually that there was no journey to get there. Nobody had to get on a plane. Nobody had to hike up the mountain. Nobody had to, sit there overnight in the cold to get that morning shot. There was no suffering, if you will, to get to the finished product. And I think that, I hate to say it, but I really think that that human condition that we're talking about, suffering is a huge part of it. And the way that we reframe suffering is that we turn it into experience, we turn it into resonance, we turn it into that feeling quality that other people can relate to, which makes them feel more human as well. So, yeah.
Well, I want to get to the dream that enlivened you. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
setting us up that you were focused on writing and acting and that
Mm-hmm.
industry, but your
Mm-hmm.
unconscious was working on something else at that time.
Absolutely. And at the time I had clients. I had a few clients here and there. I was teaching classes. I was always using dream work in my work with other writers, or it was always alive to me. I'd gone to Pacifica and done the dream tending program. So, I had formal training in it as well. And it was calling me. It was deeply calling me. And then too, I was getting some success in my writing career, and I thought, I can't leave that. But every time I'd go on a pitch, in the back of my mind, I would think, well, if I sell this show, what's going to happen to my relationship with my son? And it was a big conundrum, and it was a long-standing conundrum for me. And so I got to this edge where I thought, okay, I can't figure this one out by myself. So this was in the early days of COVID. Everybody was in lockdown. I put myself on retreat, um, which meant that for the 5 hours a day that I had a babysitter, I just went into my room, my office, and um, dropped into my dreams. And I had some wonderful dreams at the time that felt very numinous. And so I thought, okay, I'll take a week. I'll go on retreat, and hopefully my dreams will reveal to me what I need to do. And I was drawing my dreams, and I was moving with my dreams, and I was doing all kinds of writing with the dream figures and everything. And Monday went by, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday went by. I still didn't have any idea of what I was going to do. And Friday morning, I said to myself, maybe I'll just extend my retreat. And then I dropped into this dream, and it's funny, I'm getting like a whole physical remembering of that. Um, so I dropped into this dream, and this was a spectacular dream where these creatures came out of the ocean down in Santa Monica on the beach. Creatures came out of the ocean. These dolphins and whales were just breaching, and then these two golden dragons started flying. I mean, it was like one of those dreams, and I was in it. I dropped myself into this imaginal landscape, right? And it was very alive around me. And yet, as amazing as it was still like, okay, like nothing very clear is coming through the psyche. As much fun as I'm having, I could stay here forever, but. And so I knew from my own training and from what I always tell people, um, what is going on behind you? What is the thing that perhaps in the dream the ego has airbrushed out, right? Because the ego doesn't necessarily want us to change dramatically. So we'll wake up, we'll write down the dream, and there's this detail where we're like, we either don't write it down because it doesn't feel significant, or we don't remember it at all.
I
So,
find that so interesting.
yeah.
There's the
Hmm.
alchemist motto, it's sometimes called "In sterculinus invenitur."
Oh,
In filth it shall be found. Yeah,
it
where you
100%.
least want to
Yeah.
look is where you most
Yes.
need to look.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I had this feeling in the dream that there was someone over here. Didn't know who it was. But I knew that, you drop into the dream, like I said, it becomes very alive around you and you have a real sense of being back in the place. Um, and so I had a feeling that someone was standing over here, but I had not bothered to look. But I thought, okay, I should probably do what I always tell everybody else to do. And I turned and I looked. And it was this figure who had come through dreams a number of times. I call him the beloved of the soul. It's the sort of animus principle, the very supportive, masculine figure. There's no person in the world. He doesn't, have he's not projected onto a person of the world. He's pure psyche. And he was standing there, back there, and all he was doing was this, just this. I was like, okay, that's curious. Let me try to do this and see what that feels like. Because in the dream work, we work with gestures too. If you could really make a gesture of the essence of what you're feeling, what is that? So I did his gesture and I thought, what words are here? If this gesture could talk, what would it say? And it said, how can I help? And it changed. It was like a wall just cracked and fell down around me. And I realized that what I was doing in my television career was all trying to get something. And that what I was doing and wanting to do in my coaching, my dream work, was helping. And that I was not living from the heart over here because I was just obsessed with, not obsessed, but it was really all about what can they give me? How can they help me? But what I actually wanted to do and what the soul was calling me to do was, how can I help? And that's when I changed and
What a
I left
reorientation.
television. Yeah, it was a complete reorientation. But it had been calling me for a while. And I feel even as I was, even as I was an actor, even as I was a writer and working, as a creative executive, it was there. It was always happening. I just had not allowed it to come to consciousness until that moment. So,
And
yeah.
that gesture for people listening is the hands from the
Mm-hmm.
heart kind of forward
Mm-hmm.
in a, yeah, how can I help? How can I lend my hands from the heart?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a lot about the tortured artist versus the thriving artist. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe the first iteration was your writing and acting was coming from a somewhat egoic place, not the
Mm-hmm.
fullest opening. And maybe that's how you get out of being tortured, is becoming in service of something.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. If you can get there, but the trick is how do you get there? Um, and the tortured artist is a real thing. I mean, I have seen it firsthand with certain people that I've worked with. It can destroy you if you're not if you don't have a solid container around you. It can really mess with you. because you're hearing multiple voices the whole time. You're holding all of these very big archetypal energies, and you're asking them to speak through your instrument. So if you don't have safety, if you don't have that strong, healthy ego, as well as the access to the unconscious, if you don't have a way of leaving it, it can become pure torture. And I think that was what happened a lot in, you know 1900s. I feel it's shifting because people are bringing more consciousness um, to the creative process, hopefully. So yeah.
And how has that unfolded for you, this new ethos being in service? How does that,
Mm.
how's that practically changed your life?
Gosh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, it's made me happy. And I think that's probably the major way in which it has changed my life, is that it's completely shifted my perspective around what life is. Of course, being a parent helps with that too, because your life is not your own anymore. Anything you do, you're doing it in service to the next generation. But yeah, I think it's made me a better person. I think what it's really done is that it's made it so unimportant what the format is, if you will, what the result is. I don't care what it looks like. If I'm helping a person become a better artist, a more connected human being, it doesn't matter to me if I'm, who that person is, what my own creative work will look like out in the world, any of those things. It doesn't matter. I mean, I was in stage recently after years away, over 10 years away. I had the best time. I know I changed some lives with what I was doing, because people came up to me and told me afterwards. And th- that was great. But I was asked, well, are you going to now go back into it? Are you going to, be in something else? Are you going to try to pursue acting again? And I said, no. If that's what spirit calls me to do, okay, I'll do it. But I don't have an ego attachment to it. I'm not trying to get something. I'm just trying to, for lack of a better way of putting it, create rituals that can help my community, the people around me, access more of themselves, more soul, more um, understanding of what it means to be alive and what we can do in the world to create a better world. It's a long-winded way of trying to answer that
No, it's
question.
a beautiful
But
answer.
yeah,
So
thank you.
what I'm hearing is the art is a byproduct of a holing process or a healing process or something that is well founded, that the art is not destroying the vessel that creates it.
Exactly. And while the art is important, and I think it becomes more important when you look at it this way, because it becomes a vehicle for the people of the world to see themselves, to come to know themselves, and to come to know the darker sides of themselves, so that they don't have to project them out onto other groups or demographics or political parties, you know? So the art, in a sense, becomes even more important. But me in the art is not important, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I'm imagining
Yeah.
it enters the client work. I'm imagining clients come to you
Hmm.
with creative goals and that have some
Hmm.
relevancy to the dominance hierarchy and establishing themselves. And
Hmm.
then subversively you sense parts that aren't earned, conflicts that aren't conscious, and you're
Hmm.
helping them to heal. So maybe your goal has shifted, that healing is baked in now to what you're
Mm.
doing.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is that people's imagination will open that up. It isn't me who opens that up. I just show them a reflection of what's already there. But people will come in with content. Maybe they've just been cast in a movie or a play and they ask for my help to coach them, or they have a novel that they want to write and they have me help them with that. And the content that they have either come up with or been given by the world always speaks to their own journey of individuation. There's always something there that they are not conscious of yet, but that when they become conscious of it, they become more whole. So the art is really in service to the artist as well. The role that they play brings something out of them that they need to become more whole and healed people. And similarly, when people are writing something, a few months down the line, the client will always say, I knew that I was writing about something, in my life. I had no idea that this novel literally held everything that I am. And it does. If you write it well, and if you really bring consciousness to the process, like everything in your life is woven through that material. And so it becomes a real alchemical process. And it's very beautiful to watch. One of my dream work teachers always used to say, you don't do all of this dream work so that you can get the role. She said, you get the role so that you can get the big dream through playing that role and go to the next step of your individuation. So it really becomes this interesting figure eight where the art weaves through the unconscious weaves through the art, and more and more and more you become conscious of who you are from the largest possible perspective.
I love that.
So
Yeah, so the figures, the
yeah.
dream figures, are autonomous agents that are reaching into the daylight world, and you're more and more
Hmm.
respecting that and allowing them to so that
Hmm.
you're not tamping everything down, and your inner life is becoming more and more alive and participatory in your life.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Hmm.
I'm imagining a client coming in with your dream where the dragons and magical creatures were coming out of
Hmm.
the ocean, and that they might be fixated on the sky and the
As I
yeah.
was. Yeah. Yeah.
But then something
Hmm.
in you might notice the man behind, or you might sense them,
Mm.
the way they bring in the figure, you might stand out to you in some
Hmm.
way.
Yes, yes, I think so. And it's also just a facilitation, right? So we're in conversation with another person, and um, this is why we need conversation. This is why we need dialogue, because the person you're talking to will always say, well, have you thought of this? Or when this thing happened, did you notice this and that? And you didn't. And then suddenly there's an added perspective. I always say dreams are a little bit like your eyebrows, in that they're the closest thing to your eyes, but you can't see them. So because the dream is so personal, and because it's so like interwoven into who I am, it's really hard for me to interpret it, because again, as I said before, the ego will airbrush out all of the details that could be problematic to its existence. So um so again, I will very rarely tell people any kind of interpretation of the dream. So they won't come in and talk about their dragons, and I'll say, well, in Chinese mythology the dragons mean this, and then in
Hmm. That's called
European mythology
that's called
I don't
amplification, right?
interpret.
Some Jungians
Yeah,
do
it's
that.
called, we might do it a little bit. I might sort of throw some little seeds in there and see if they take. um, but most of the time what I will do is just help people facilitate a rediscovery of those energies, those figures in the dream, and particularly what they open up for the dreamer. So it's good and well to know what a yellow dragon means in Chinese mythology. And it just so happens that it meant something of that for me. That was really the visceral and somatic experience that I had of that energy. Somebody else might really not like them at all. They might not like the color yellow. They might be really scared of any kind of reptilian energy. And so the dream takes on a completely different meaning. But if the person were to come in and say, I had a dream about yellow dragons, and I, as the dream tender, say, well, that's great because that would mean this, I've shortchanged um, their life, really.
Mhm.
Because, yeah.
I really like that you explore rather than interpret. And
Hmm.
it's reminding me of a supervisor once said, the dream is already an interpretation of the person's life. So we
Absolutely.
just need to stay with
Hmm.
it and really get it.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing too is, you probably are familiar with this Jung quote: if you were conscious of the material already, you wouldn't need the dream. The dream comes because you're not conscious of what's moving through that particular place in your
Mm.
life, that particular way of being with what's happening in the world. So the dream has to come to offer that slight correction or that other possibility. So,
I've heard you talk
hmm
about important dreams, use that phrase, that some dreams seem to
hmm
hold more power, or they just, something channels or something archetypal comes through, or something very important is in the dream.
hmm
I've had, some of those dreams for sure. And I've had other dreams which they just seem like a mishmash of, it's hard to make much of them. Is meaning evenly distributed throughout your dream life, or does it break
mm.
through it in powerful ways at times?
I think it breaks through in powerful ways at times. And what I'll notice too is that um, people will have a series of dreams that really speak to the same thing, the same issue. So maybe similar, the same characters will weave through a few dreams at a time, or similar themes, similar landscapes. There will be like a set of 3 to 4 dreams that really go, okay, here is what we would like you to look at now. Um,
They come in sets like waves.
yes, they really do. They really do. Yeah. Um, and I say that, and then of course, for some people, it's not like that at all. They'll have one dream that they remember throughout a year. Um, but that is definitely a thread or a trend that I'm noticing. And then I do think that there is an element of the dream life too, where you're just sort of moving through material. You're just cycling through whatever needs to move through the psyche. Particularly, I think if you've spent a lot of time looking at Netflix, or you've been binge watching a show, psyche will just kind of need that clean out. And maybe it doesn't matter so much that um, that these characters that you've been looking at all day are moving through your dreams.
So there might be
But then with
signal
psyche,
and noise. There might be some elements that are less.
yeah, I think so. Like stream of consciousness thoughts. But it's like when you journal, um, if you do automatic writing in your journal, there might be a lot of just nonsense that comes out. And then here and there, there's this nugget of like, oh, wow, I could actually start thinking like this, or this is a great idea, So I think dreams are a little bit like that too, and people don't remember their dreams always. So it'll just kind of move. The river will keep flowing. And then once in a while, there's this like, oh, okay, here you go. Here you go. So, yeah. And more important dreams will come if you start to ask for them.
Yeah, have you
So,
noticed that with clients that as they do this work,
mm.
the dreams start to come more?
Oh yeah, yeah. And dreams change over time. So people will come in with some very clear thematic content, and as they work through it, the figures start to change. So, as an example, again, the animus might start out as a threatening figure or a wild man or a criminal or something that is uncontrollable for the woman dreamer who's got that relationship to her inner man, and then as she works with that figure, dances with that figure, it changes, and suddenly it holds a different type of energy, and it'll always be that masculine energy for the woman, but it might morph into much more of a beautiful figure, a beloved of the soul, as I said. So
Yeah, and the animus
yeah.
being the major repressed quality,
Mm-hmm.
right, or the gateway to the rest of the unconscious, some
Mm-hmm.
to some primary figure that mediates a lot of the rest of the unconscious.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
At first, you might have a relationship to your unconscious that's distrusting and treats it as a
Absolutely.
threat. Yeah.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, often when nightmares come, and nightmares, like nothing else, bring people to somebody like me because they're so uncomfortable. They're so hard to handle. Many people start getting, anxiety about going to sleep. But the nightmares are really only there to make people pay attention, because nothing else will make people pay attention. So,
I'm thinking of the advice for bad trips, which is see if you
mm,
can accept the experience, see if you can welcome whatever's happening, however heinous
mm-hmm,
and frightening, and that
mm-hmm,
itself can transform the elements. And so, yeah,
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that seems to resonate with your approach in accepting and owning elements. Is that
Mm-hmm.
fundamental? Is that the thing that's producing the biggest shift?
Yes, I think so. But I think in order to get there, you need a lot of support. And the beauty of the dream, the beauty of the nightmare, is that it will often hold that support. You just haven't seen it. Again, making that slight turn and looking behind you, you might discover another being in the dream. You might discover a tree. You might discover anything that can create that level of support. I will never have anybody go into this deep, dark material, whether it's something they're writing or if they're cast as a serial killer or, a character in the Scottish play or similar, or they just have a nightmare. I'll never let people go and engage that image unless we first establish the support system. So I'll ask people to find those figures of support. They might come from dream. It might be yellow dragon. Oh, great. Now I have a figure that I can work with. It makes me, that really relaxes that anxiety that I have about the nightmare figures. It might be a person from childhood. It might be a place from my life where I feel truly at home, and supported. It might be an animal. Whatever opens up that trust, that acceptance, as you're saying. We need those figures first and foremost. They then allow me to look at the intolerable image, at the nightmare figure, and go, okay, there's something here I haven't noticed. They actually are like me in this way. And once you can see that, then you can begin a dialogue again. So you take back the projection from the figure in dream. You can do it in dream, maybe you can do it in the world. And maybe then we have a better world ultimately.
Yeah, where projections are owned.
Yes,
So
yes.
we come at it from different angles, but I feel like we end up at a very similar place. And
Mm,
one way to describe it is a philosophy where there are no enemies within
yes,
or no
100%.
bad parts. From an internal
Mm-hmm.
family systems perspective, all of the parts, even the threatening ones, they formed for some intelligent reason to protect you in some
Mm-hmm.
way, and they've just become frozen, and they want to update and to become team members if they can be included in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then
Absolutely.
as you do that, your threatening parts become more and more cooperative. And in Peter Levine's work, he talks about the unconscious tone goes from threatening to
Mm-hmm.
supportive or nostalgic. It has a glow to it, the inner world, as
Mm-hmm.
it's more and
Mm-hmm.
more earned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so then, as that happens, you can tolerate the competing interests of the different parts. You can
Mm-hmm.
be in contact with both, and then you don't need to project your bad parts into immigrants or Jewish people or black people. You can, yeah.
Exactly.
And so then outer conflicts will slowly diminish as people have more and more capacity internally.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And so if I can recognize it as mine, going back to the Tempest, right? I think we probably talked about that 8 years ago. Um, we have this magician, beautiful male ego character, Prospero, who is so mean to the shadow aspect, the Caliban figure, the animalistic nature that he lives with. And in the last part of the play, he turns to this animal nature and says, "This darkness I acknowledge mine." And so I think that is really a crystallization of what you're talking about. This darkness I acknowledge mine. If I can see that I have the capacity for brutality, for rage, for, you know, horrendous imaginings, and we all do. It doesn't mean that we act on them, of course, but we all have that capacity. If I can see that, then I can forgive myself.
Mm.
And if I can forgive myself, there's a possibility, I believe, of a ripple effect out into the environment where I suddenly don't need to see it played out there because I've played it out in here, and I have played it out on stage. I've played it out in my screenplay. So there's that individuation again that can happen. And it doesn't necessarily take away the brutality of what's happening in the world, but it does set me free to make a different choice. And it sets me free to, as you're saying, not project it onto a demographic or a, a neighbor, or anything. I can go, yeah, they do that. But, if I'm honest, I could do it too. I just don't. But what also happens is that, and I have done this work quite a lot for myself and also for other people with whoever in the world holds that projection. So let's say a political figure or a, an ex husband or somebody who did something bad to me when I was little. And you take that energy of the intolerable image. This comes from Stephen Eisenstadt, my mentor. He always talks about taking that energy of the intolerable into the underworld where the original form of it exists. So that would be, let me put it a different way. The projection that I have on this external person is a distorted energy of something that in its purest form would actually feed me, would actually um, work with me, and would hold tremendous energy for me as a human being. I've repressed it for whatever reason, and it's become ugly. And because I can't look at the ugly, I take it and I go, oh, it belongs to this one. That's the ugly, not me.
Mm. Is there an example you could
So,
give of this to really hit home how it works?
So, as an example, if I took my least favorite politician and thought about all of the qualities that he or she has that I just hate, but then take that energy and really work hard with my figures of support with me, all of these figures, my ancestors, my dream figures, my animals, all of these figures as support. And I engage with that least favorite politician in a different way. I can see, oh, there's suffering here, and I know suffering. There is greed here, and I know greed. I can relate to that. Now I'm going to drop into a different level of the psyche, and I'm going to see if that image had a different form, like a more pure form, knowing that it has nothing to do with the actual politician out there. This is just my
Using it
work,
as a gateway into yourself.
using it
Yeah.
as a gateway to myself. Then I might drop down and I might see a battered animal, say, and I can take ownership of that battered animal. And I can say, what do you need? Animal says, I just need you to see me. I just need you to pet me once in a while. Then I've taken responsibility and I've pulled back my projection. Again, least favorite politician can do whatever they want out there. It's not my business anymore
It stops triggering you.
because it stops triggering you. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It triggers me in a different way where I don't feel like it destroys me, or I don't feel like it has that much power over me. It may have power on one level, but on the underneath level, it doesn't.
That's helpful. We should probably just describe how the process of dream work goes,
Hmm.
how you set it up, where you start, what you look for when it goes well,
Hmm.
what happens.
Okay. um, so people will come in, they will recount their dream. I don't take, I don't let them write the dream to me beforehand. I'd rather just have it in its purest form. They come into the office or into the Zoom room and they give me the dream. Then I draw people in, by which I mean I do some breath work, some somatic work to create a different spaciousness and really get out of the judgment, the anxiety, you know, all of the expectations of what's supposed to happen or what people want to have happen, and drop into that deeper layer of breath and body and, enliven people a little bit through some gentle movement, gentle breath work, and release of tension. Then we'll enter the dream again, by which I mean I'll ask them to recreate imaginally with their eyes closed. I invite them to really bring in the somatic experience. What is the air like? How is it different? What's the smell like here? What do you hear? What do you notice? How does this light in this space hit your skin, and what does the body want to do in this place? And then we'll bring in the figures. We'll work with the figures in a similar way. We'll speak. We'll slow it down enough that the dreamer can really get a felt sense of what this figure is and what this figure opens up inside of them. So, of all the images that Psyche could give us, this is the one that it chose. Why? Who is this one? What is the resonance in me of this one? And then we'll speak with the figure. Oftentimes, people will come in and they'll speak a little bit to what's going on in their life. I invite that. And then once we're here, once we're dropped into the dream, we'll work with the figure that's in the dream. And we may ask those questions. Well, what do you think about my writer's block? What would you do? How would you handle, these problems that I'm having in my family?
So you bring in
Whatever it may
the
be.
current symptom or the active
Yes.
complaint.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And then the figure will have a perspective on that. And then we'll ask, well, how do I live this perspective more fully? What are some things I could do to maybe live a little bit more with your energy in my worldly circumstance? I will say, though, because you asked, how do I know that it's going well? There's always a moment, if the session's going well, there is always a moment where I have no idea where we're going. No idea. And then I breathe and I trust, because I too will think, oh, it's going this way, but then suddenly it goes that way. But that's where the turn happens, and that's when it really goes well, because nobody knows what the heck is happening. And of course, that's, as we've talked about, that's where the gold is found. Um, and then once we've worked for a bit with these figures and we've really gotten to know them, I'll ask people to come back out of the drop down state, open their eyes, and we'll talk a little bit about what are some things that I can do in the next week or so to help come closer or bring that energy more into my life, bring that energy through more. Um, Oftentimes, gestures will come organically. And people don't even know that they're doing them. But again, I'll slow them down and I'll go, okay, what is this? You're doing this. What is this for you? Or whatever the gesture may be. And then again, there will be some information coming through from the physical body, and people will have that tool. Then I often will say to people, so okay, you have this gesture, right? How can I help? And what would be the minimal, tiny version of that you could do and nobody would notice? What could you do? Well, I could just do this. Nobody would see me do it. I could do it in my pocket, but it would spark the same um, quality of experience.
Developing a tool to access that state.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah. To access that quality of experience in their daily life. Because where it may be easy to do when you're dropped in and you're in, somebody's office with a person who is all about facilitating that process. Maybe when you're in the actual situation where it counts, it's not as easy. But so if you keep practicing this, how can I help? You keep practicing and practicing and practicing every day. Do 10 times in the morning. And then you have your minimal version of it. That's just this. Same thing happens. That quality of experience begins to move through me just because the body is so alive. And the body always lives in this sort of dreamlike state.
Breathing this dream energy into life. You're more and more
Yes.
bringing it in.
And that's why it comes, because it wants to be known in the world. And specifically for the dreamer, because it wants the dreamer to have access to it so that they can do something else and stop doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. They can actually have a change of perspective, a change of behavior through the energy of the dream. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could feel just that gesture. I could feel how that could shift things. We talk about somatic anchors.
That's what it is, exactly. Mm-hmm.
The To disclose, we've done dream work together. You've taken me through a few dream walkthroughs. Is that the phrase you would use?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were immensely powerful experiences at a very formative time as I was switching, similarly to you, switching from an emphasis on creative production to an emphasis of how can I help.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to open up the dream a little bit that we did the one time. And I think what feels really powerful, or maybe the active ingredient, is how much you cared about these images, and you were rapt. You were so engaged and alive and intent on giving this form and on valuing the inner life that I could rest into that. And then it made it easier for
Mm-hmm.
me to experience it as valuable. as worth attending to. And so this image that happened in the dream, where it was a side note of the dream, similar to the figure in yours, interestingly. But the dream ended with me on a beach looking out over the ocean, and there was a beacon that was submerged. It could just be seen in the ocean.
Right.
And
Right.
I can't remember if you suggested we investigate that, or if I just wanted to, but I didn't expect us to go into that element of the dream. It was not a prominent element, but we did, and I swam out to this beacon, and I kind of followed the line down from it, down under the ocean, and a cave opened up.
Oh, that's
And the
right.
cave
Yes,
was,
I
yeah,
remember.
it was a cave full of treasure, and a council of elders, a little bit Tolkien-esque, and this sly figure who was a trickster energy had a gift for me, and it was a dagger. And I had not anticipated any of this. I hadn't really even expected that I could produce an image like this without intending, but it just happened. I remember saying when we were working, I have no idea what this is about, this dagger. And you said something like, doesn't surprise me, or you could maybe see more of the context of the dream than I could. I was so in it. You just suggested that maybe there was meaning to this dagger that helped me to sit with it more. And as I reflected on that dream, I don't think I necessarily even developed the meaning in that session, but as I continued to sit with that image, I realized part of me needed to die. I was so attached to this childhood creative story of, I don't know, being some famous artist or whatever it was.
Oh, sure, sure.
And that was actually getting in the way of something more important. And so, yeah, I think you really tending to the images in a way that gave them power and a right to be helped me to value that. And then when I look back at it, that was absolutely what needed to happen. And yeah, my psyche was ready in transition much more than I could realize at the time.
Yeah, and that's often where that constellation will come. That because the psyche's already been doing so much of it, the origin of the image has traveled and traveled and traveled with you, and then it becomes this crystallization of the dagger. This is what needs to happen. But there's been a preparation on your side as well. And the beauty of that moment, and it's coming back to me as you're describing it again, is that surprise, because that's where everything can open up from. If you found a dagger and you said, "Oh, I know exactly what that's for," well, then why would you get it? Again, why would you even need to get the dagger if you already know what it's for? But it's that reveling in the mystery of what the psyche produces. There's the mystery of it, and then also this, even if you don't have a certainty, then just pretend that you have a certainty that it is here for a profound reason.
I think this is our job as therapists and, dream tenders. And I draw a commonality here. It's co-creating. It's an artistic endeavor.
Absolutely.
It's not a scientific, backward-looking thing where the answer was back there and we just need to draw some straight lines and create a geometric pattern and then we're done. But it's
Absolutely.
more of an enlivening process where things come more and more into view and more into life. And we don't know where it's going. All we're doing is helping to guide a little and helping something to emerge, or the metaphor of the midwife.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it really is a mastery of I don't know, as I think art should be at this time. Art and dreaming and facilitating healing for others should have that level of mastery. Of course, we train and we have mastery in the intellectual, academic sense as well, and that is absolutely important because without that, there is no form that we can break out of. Um, but then when you're actually in the session with the person, it's about, or in the session with your creative work, what you're looking for is that mastery of I don't know, because it's from I don't know that the new can be born.
Yes, to really access something original or really alive. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just the third alternative, we are in such a difficult spot culturally as a world now. I mean, we really have come to that edge. And so what do we have? We have I don't know. And from I don't know, there's always the spark that suddenly appears, And of course you have to choose, you have to make your choices in this world that's so full of choices. But I do think that we also have to allow for that possibility of a third thing emerging. Maybe it's not this or that. Maybe this and that. If I hold both, can give birth to a different way of being, a different reality.
That somehow
Yeah.
incorporates both, right? Becomes more of an and than
Yes.
an
Yeah.
or.
Yes. It's not to be or not to be anymore. I mean that we've lived that metaphor. It's or that schema. It's to be and not to be existing at the same time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to come back to what you said about the not knowing as the right place to be creatively.
Hmm.
And I had an art teacher who said, if you know what you're creating before you start and then you execute it, and it is like you
Mm.
intended, what you've created is propaganda.
Oh wow, interesting. Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
wonder if that's what we're seeing in Hollywood, in a lot of mainstream media. Not enough risk taking, that where there's too much intentionality around what is created and not enough space for
Hmm.
something to surprise us.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And there's a lot of soapboxing happening. Everybody has their sort of thing that they stand for, and there's nothing wrong with that. But art should surprise, and the artistic process should surprise the artist and the viewer. Um, so um, art is not news, and even though there's always a societal level to art, there's more to it as well. It isn't propaganda. And if you get too married to one side of things in art, I think you cut yourself off from the possibility of surprise and the possibility of, again, that third alternative emerging that is neither this nor that. And then I think too, art has the capacity to really help lead the way for the culture. What I find in Hollywood is that artists very rarely take that on, that role of torchbearer for for the soul. Art has always had that mission, right, to really help the world individuate, to help point the way to the future. And I know many, many artists in Hollywood who are actively taking that on. And I think that's very important now, because the answer is not going to come from contending with the issues of the day alone. The answer is going to come if we, in the words of Marie Louise von Franz, swim away from the collective and begin to take our own inner images seriously and then bring them to the culture. Because, again, they're here for a reason. Dream wants us to individuate, and art has the same capacity, the same pull. Um, Joseph Campbell says that myths are collective dreams, and dreams are individual myths. So the stories that we are telling ideally are collective dreams. They are the myths for the culture. And we need stories to live by. We need stories to define us. So that's that's my clarion call when I work with people always is, what myth are you giving to the culture? And what in your work speaks to where we're going and how we're going to get there?
Yeah, and I want to extend it even further that so the mythic is what uh, you know Hollywood is maybe a little bit devoid in at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But and
Mm-hmm.
personally, the more mythic your life becomes, the more it surprises you in a heroic
Mm-hmm.
sense, the more
Yeah.
alive it becomes, and the more archetypes are fully
Mm-hmm.
manifest, and a multiplicity of them, right? Not just a single.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so more material becomes available to you. And this is why ultimately I think dream work is such a major component of creative content for me and for the people I work with, is because when we are alive to our own myth, when we're alive to the mythic within us, we can bring it to the world. And we can create those mythic stories because we're so used to them. We're so used to looking at them. We
Mm.
examine them every morning after we wake up with our dreams. Yeah.
So I think then that a lot of our problems are a failure of imagination. Like when
100%.
I hear a lot of people very negative on AI, for instance, and
Hmm.
I just think we haven't found the myths, we haven't found our way through it. But I don't think we're
It's brand
done as
new.
humans.
Hmm. No, absolutely. No, we're going to be fine, probably, hopefully.
Or if
But
we're done, we'll
but
go
again,
out,
you're right.
we can
Yeah.
go out in a mythic way.
Hmm. Yeah, and we can find ways of using it that really serves us. There's no doubt. But we just have to, again, we have to go within and decide, what myth am I living, and how am I going to use this to further my expression of what it means to be human in its fullness.
Yeah.
And there is a place for
How to
that.
live a life that's not propaganda, that does surprise you, that is
Yes,
alive.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to
Hmm. Hmm.
when you reoriented to the serving ethos,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, something more mythic started to come through, it feels to me.
Hmm.
That,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and then, yeah, so
Absolutely.
your life story can become like these stories you work with. Your own life
That's
starts to
right.
actually
Yeah.
have that energy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And those conversations take on much more specificity because I know the images, I know the figures and the archetypes within my own life. So I can pull them out when I'm writing this character, or when I'm writing that scene. I've lived through it in some way or another, even though it hasn't been like a grand scale, war in the 18th century. But I've certainly, you know, thought deep principles within myself, and so I understand what that means, and the fatigue of it, and the getting back on the horse, and all of these things. And so I can write to any experience because there is a resonance inside of my own life, and that continues to open up, of course. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
I feel like I could do
Hmm.
another 3 hours
I
easily.
know.
But
Yes,
we,
same.
yeah, unfortunately are at our
Hmm.
time. I just want to call out the image behind you, since it's of your
Mm,
homeland. I didn't mention you're
it
from
is.
Denmark,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
yeah, I think there's a European quality to some of the way that you process the world, and
That's
I
so
sense
kind
some
of
of
you.
that lineage coming through personally.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And this is, the woods where I grew up, and my house is full of grounding figures and images like that. I just, create a home space in a larger sense of that, in a larger sense of that word. So this is but one of many, many such talismans.
I
So
like that. So you're creating
yeah,
your world with intentionality to have these rich
yeah,
images that help to
hmm
anchor something.
exactly. Yeah. hmm
Great. Well, thank you. I hope
Yeah.
to have you again soon.
Yes, I hope so too. Okay.
Cheers. If you enjoyed this conversation and you want to become more involved, look for Snowball Psychology on Patreon. Our music is Find Your Way Beat by Nana Kwabena.